Hey guys, how do you know what to put in your garden? Exactly what to grow in your garden? Welcome back to the 30-day challenge. Today is day 6 of the challenge, and we are really trucking right along. And I think I said that yesterday, but it's true. We are. Today we're talking about how you can figure out exactly what to put in your garden. If you've been with me on the challenge, you know we've covered where to put the garden, how much sun you have in your yard will determine that. How much space you have determines that. We talked about how to fertilize, whether you should do in ground or above ground in containers. And today we're going to zero in on exactly what you need to put in that garden. And yesterday, you remember I told you that the secret to your garden's success lies in 3 things. The first is knowing what you like to eat and growing what you like to eat, making sure those things will save you money on your grocery bill, and 3, making sure you can grow them successfully. And to this point, you're a beginner gardener, right? That's why you're here. So you don't really know if you can grow them or not. And you're looking to me to help you with that. So absolutely, I can help you with that. That's what today's challenge content's about today. So we are talking about direct sowing versus transplanting. And direct sowing is where you have a seed and you take that seed and you put it in the ground, you cover it up, water it, give it some sunlight, and in time that seed will sprout, grow into a seedling that grows into a plant. A transplant is a seedling that has been sown somewhere else or planted somewhere else in a tray. It has been grown, usually indoors under grow lights, and then it's sold as a seedling that you can then plant in your garden when the time is right. So a lot of newbie beginner gardeners get very stuck on this, and I understand why. They're overwhelmed with all the choices. How do I know if I need to direct sow versus transplant? Which one makes the most sense for each crop? And I have some general truths that will help you make that determination for yourself. And that's what I want to share with you today. So by far the easiest way to garden is to just grab some seeds and throw them in your planting space, cover them, water them, and let them sprout. And that's the direct sown option that we just talked about. So generally speaking, the larger the seed is, the more successful you will be with direct sowing it, because a larger seed gives you a larger seedling. And when you direct sow something, you put it in the soil and you water it and you fertilize it. You're giving it all these amazing conditions for growth, but you're also giving weeds those conditions as well. And if your seed takes a while to sprout, those seeds will compete with it and really will cause it to get leggy and reach for the light if it has to compete too much. And it's not a good idea. You want to give your little baby seedling the best opportunity for success. And so the bigger the seed, the bigger the seedling, the more brawny and robust, right? The bigger the baby, the more successful usually it can be. And the same thing goes for seedlings. So when we think about things like bean seeds, beans are quite large and they do very well being direct sown. So do things like cantaloupe, summer squash. I've got other things that are direct sown that do very well. But generally speaking, the bigger the seed, the better. Also for direct sowing, you want to direct sow all of your root crops. So a root crop is something that is harvested at the root stage and you eat it as a root. So parsnips, beets, carrots, those are things that I recommend you direct sow as well, because those roots don't like to be transplanted. They don't like to be planted and then you dig them up and you put them somewhere else. They just don't do as well. Some of them don't grow at all. So for my root crops, I recommend that you do that. So, so let's talk about that. We said direct sowing. The key to direct sowing is finding those larger seeds that do well. Because they grow faster, they sprout faster, they're able to fight out that weed competition. There are other crops, though, that do well as transplants and actually do best as transplants. And those are the crops that you see a lot of in your garden center. So in a couple months, like it's still end of January right now, and it's cool outside. But in a couple of months, you're going to start to see in all of the garden centers all of those big trays of transplants. And generally speaking, you have the really popular ones. You have your tomatoes, peppers, all of your types of brassicas like your broccoli, cabbage, and anything you see there in the garden center, usually speaking, unless it's a root crop. Sometimes you will see a root crop in the garden center, and I do not recommend that. I don't know why they do it. It's a pet peeve of mine, because if you go to Lowe's or some other type of garden center and you buy carrots and you plant them, they're not going to do as well. They're going to fail. You're going to think it's your fault, but it's not. So, and not to mention it's not economical, which is not what I want for you. So I want you to have, to transplant things that are going to fruit a lot and make a lot of fruit for you so that you can pick them. And they're quite prolific for you. Things like tomatoes, peppers, even broccoli, you can get multiple cuts off of. Like once you cut the head of broccoli, smaller shoots will come out that you can harvest. And so I want you to transplant those types of crops that will keep giving for you over time. It's not like a one and done thing, right? Like a bulbing onion. Once it bulbs up and you take it out of the ground, it's done. So that's something I would want you to sow yourself, or buy a cheap start. So those are the transplants that you're going to use. The benefit of doing a transplant too is that you get it started earlier. So if you are in a zone 3 or 4 and you have a very short window of growing, you're going to want to get a head start on that. And so if you try to plant your seeds in the ground, if you try to plant your seeds in the ground, you're going to lose a lot of time. Whereas if you want to plant your transplants, you are going to have fruit faster. So you're going to, April 15th, let's say that April 15th is your last frost date. You are going to plant a ton of peppers and tomatoes. You're planting nice, strong seedlings. And at that time, so, in a few months, you're going to have a crop faster than if you had planted seeds on April 15th. So you're going to have a better opportunity to get crops faster if you transplant those things like peppers, brassicas, tomatoes. Now there are other crops that I call your flexible crops, and those are crops that you could do either way. So lettuce is one of those. Actually, squash is one of those as well. But things like lettuce, you can direct sow a lot of thick. You can sow it thickly in big, thick bands, and you'll have a ton of lettuce for yourself. And you can just either harvest it at the leaf stage, or you can thin it out when those seedlings are small, and then you'll be able to grow large heads of lettuce. So you can do either one of those. You can take either one of those approaches with that. So you will see trays of lettuce at the garden center. So it's quite all right to go ahead and grab some of those. So because lettuce will continue to give you great crops. It will give you a ton of harvest. It's what we call a cut and come again crop, because you're able to harvest the outer leaves and the plant will continue to grow from the inside leaves. And then you're just continuing to harvest from those and continuing to get great harvests off of them all. So you really can have great success with direct sowing and transplanting in your garden. The larger the seed, the better it does with direct sowing. You can always transplant. So if you go to the garden center, you're going to be successful if you grab transplants for crops that will continue to give and bear a lot of fruit, or bear a lot of harvestable vegetables, fruit, whatever you want to call it, right? So like a pepper plant will give you lots of peppers. So that's a safe bet to transplant. It makes good sense. Even if you spend $3 for a transplant, you're still going to make, or you're going to save a lot of money on that plant. The only thing I would shy away from is something like, your root crops. Root crops don't like to have their roots disturbed, and that's going to be very difficult to get a great crop out of if you buy it from a garden center at transplant stage. It's much better for you to buy packs of carrots and parsnips and beets, direct sow them, and then thin them once your seedlings emerge, and then they can grow into the size that you want, and then you harvest them. So I hope this has given you something to think about. You know what you're growing now. You can plug that into your garden plan. You know how big your garden is. You know if it's above ground versus below ground. And so we've talked a lot about all of that. I'm super excited for you guys. I know that you're going to do very well on this. Okay, so there you have it. That's the difference between direct sowing versus transplanting. That's how you're going to figure out how you want to grow, what exactly you're going to grow in your garden. You're going to think about direct sowing versus transplanting, and then you're going to make your choices. And tomorrow we're going to talk about garden layout. So now that you know that you're direct sowing in certain areas and transplanting in others, we're going to look at how your garden should be laid out so that you can achieve that. So if you want to catch the rest of this challenge or go and look at videos that you didn't catch before, all you have to do is subscribe. Bye for now, and I will see you tomorrow.